Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's fourth meeting. I am your Chair of Administration Fire. I'm your Chair, Jason Trombetta. Will not be open to the public or attend. Anybody with concerns can email Joanne Shimmy at West Lincoln before 4:30 the day of the meeting. This meeting is being live streamed and will be recorded and available on the township's website. We have a land acknowledgement statement that the Township of West Lincoln, being part of the Niagara region, is situated on treaty land. The land is steeped in rich history of the First Nations such as the Hattaway-Wendoronk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Metis of Inuit people, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island and that live and work in the Niagara region today. The Township of West Lincoln, as a part of the regional municipality of Niagara, stands with Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of lands on which we live. Members of committee, is there any changes in orders of items on the agenda? Seeing none. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest? Seeing none. We have an appointment this evening. Dylan Pilot, Beaver Scout, the creation of West Lincoln Citizen of the Year Award and Youth Citizen Award, and he has a PowerPoint presentation. So Dylan, I'll turn the floor over to you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Do I do my presentation?
Yep.
Dylan Pilot presents West Lincoln Citizen of the Year Award. Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Dylan and I am 7 years old. I wanted to do this because I am working on my North Star Award for Beaver Scouts. I want to be kind. The North Star Award is to complete a meaningful service project. I would like our town to create a Citizen of the Year Award. Why should we have an award? To motivate people in our community to be nice and recognize the people who are nice and make a difference in our town. We should have a Citizen of the Year and a Youth Citizen of the Year. How do we decide who wins? People get nominated through the township website. You can only get nominated if you live in West Lincoln, you can't be on town council or be in their family, not one in the past 3 years. Be nice and make the town a great place. Can you hear me?
Yep, doing great.
What should they win? The winner should get a trophy to take home and a plaque to stay at town hall with their name on. They should get cool stuff like chocolate. Many businesses have already said they will donate stuff if you vote yes. Please check the document. Well, please see the document. I hope you vote yes to make our town a great place. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dylan. That was a great presentation. Much appreciated. Give it a nice round of applause for members of the committee. Thank you. So, Dylan, we have a little recommendation here, and then I'm going to open up to the floor for members of committee if they have any questions, and we'll go through this. So the recommendation that the Township of West Lincoln Council supports in principle a Citizen of the Year and Youth Citizen of the Year program, and that Dylan Pilot, COY and YCAO program presentation be referred to staff, and that staff be hereby directed to investigate a West Lincoln Citizen of the Year, a Citizen of the Year, a Youth Citizen of the Year program commencing in the fall of 2022, and that staff provide a recommendation at a future standing committee or council meeting prior to the fall of 2022. So members of the committee, I need a mover for that. Got Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Gannan, and I will turn to members of committee for any comments or comments or questions they have for Dylan. So Councillor Gannan, go ahead. And then I got the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Dylan, thank you very much for your presentation. I wanted to tell you that West Lincoln used to have a Citizen of the Year, probably before your mom and dad were even born, maybe before some members of this council were even born. But a very interesting thing to me is that one of the winners, in fact, the third winner ever in 1983, was the leader of the Cub group in West Lincoln. She had been a Cub leader for 24 years and took every course that she could possibly take to make sure that she became a better Cub leader. And I remember this because my son, who's now a grown-up, was one of the Cubs, along with his friend Marty, who was also a Cub, were part of the presentation to Mrs. Hiskett. Her name was Mary Hiskett, and part of the presentation to her was made by some Cubs. So I thought it was a really neat thing that as part of your badge work, you brought this idea back to West Lincoln. We have not had one for quite a few years, and it probably is a really good idea to look at it again. I know a lot of other municipalities have different categories. Instead of just looking at one person, it might be one person who's very involved in one part of the community, maybe volunteers a lot, and maybe one person who does some other kind of work, maybe as a Cub leader or a Scout leader or a 4-H leader or something. But we did not ever have a youth leader. So I think the most important part to me is that you are looking at young people as well and looking for a way to recognize young people. So thank you very much for your presentation, and I hope that our staff will have a really good look at what we used to do. It was the Chamber of Commerce who did it, not the township, but it doesn't matter who puts it forward. It's just a good idea to look at it again. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Glenn. Mr. Mayor?
And I'd like to also thank Dylan for his presentation. It was excellent done. I'm very impressed with the quality and caliber of your presentation, and you spoke very clearly, and you gave us all the information that we needed to make a wise decision with respect to this matter. So I wanted to thank you very much. I think I can do it on behalf of the council, but all the council members, I'm sure, are very impressed with your presentation. So thank you very much for Dylan for raising the bar, allowing or I guess, you know, I think in this term, you're the youngest person to make a presentation to this council, and you did such an excellent job. I think that's you know, speaks well of you and your family, but probably also your classmates. Sometimes we tend to dismiss the little children among us, but you did superb. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other members of committee? Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and through you to Dylan there. Again, Dylan, probably just sound like we're echoing ourselves here, but thank you for not just making the effort to be here tonight and make your presentation, but having the courage. Not everybody is as confident or comfortable to be able to present themselves in a public setting like this and do an excellent job like you did. You should be very proud of yourself. And I think, Mr. Chair, this has to be one of the easiest resolutions coming forward to support. I can't see why anybody would oppose this in any capacity. Again, I think this is something that would serve our community well, and I feel inspired that the youth of our next generation coming through has these great ideas, and they're trying to help connect the community and celebrate all the great things within the community. And you certainly have 110% of my support behind this. So thank you, Dylan, for your presentation and for bringing this important matter front and center to this council.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Riley. Any other members of committee? Councillor Yonker?
Yeah, same as everybody else. Thanks, Dylan, for the presentation, and the for your parents to help you with this is also a nice thing to see. Parents being involved with your children's extra activities after school is always important, and so yeah, thanks for bringing this forward to us and also pointing out that you would like to make this presentation. So well done, Dylan. Thanks for being here tonight. I can't imagine my 7-year-old doing that well of a job. I don't think he'd sit as still as you have so far. So good job.
Thank you, Councillor Yonker. Any other members of committee? No, I just want to say, Dylan, good job. Your reading was fantastic. Really good job doing that reading and reading out those papers. That's for 7 years old. You know, I'm really impressed because I know how I was at 7 years old, and I don't know if I was a good reader at 7 years old like you are today. So, you know, you did good research and a good presentation, and you know, this is a good thing that's coming to West Lincoln, and I can't wait to see this being approved. So good job, Dylan. Keep up the good work. Okay, members of committee, we had a mover and a seconder, so all those in favor on the recommendation, and that carries unanimously. Thank you, Dylan, very much for everything. All your hard work today. I think you need a day off of school tomorrow. So have a great day, okay?
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, moving on, members of committee. Item A26-22, Nimit Sane, cybersecurity expert and CAO, Jesse Andrews, account manager, Richard Catahan, general manager, and Ernest Nieto, senior project manager of Votes Canada. Read internet voting as an alternative voting method for the township 2022 municipal and school board election, and they have a PowerPoint presentation attached. I'd like to welcome you gentlemen tonight. Thank you for coming. I don't know who to turn it to, who's presenting, but feel right ahead. So it looks like Jesse turned his mic on, so floor is yours, Jesse.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I think I'll go ahead and share my screen and kick us off. The team here from Votes tonight will give a little bit of an overview. I'm sure we'll have some questions. Yeah. And so everyone will be pitching in a little bit here on our end.
Just one thing before you get going there, Jesse. There's two Jesse Andrews, so just for our record, I don't know, just so we can just know who's on, just for record of for our clerk.
Oh, yeah. I don't know why it's got me logged in twice. Maybe an attendee versus a panelist, I'm not sure. But there's only one Jesse Andrews from Votes on tonight.
Okay. Is he with, is the other Jesse Andrews with your group, or?
So for some reason, it's Richard Catahan.
Okay,
it's
perfect.
That's Jesse Andrews.
Perfect, Mr. Catahan. That's all we just needed to know, just to verify. Thank you very much. So go ahead, Jesse. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll just say that we have a tough act and presentation to follow. Dylan did a really nice job, but we'll do our best here. So I'm going to share the few slides that we have available tonight, and I think take just a second to set the really the setting, the environment for us presenting. And we've had the opportunity to present and propose to the West Lincoln election team and evaluation team, and this is something that we had a really good conversation with them about the product and service that we'll describe here, about putting that out for your election, which will be, if passed, a hybrid scenario to allow online voting alongside paper voting in the polling locations. So we've got a quick summary today that I'll kick it off, and we'll go from there. To begin, I'll just introduce Nimit Sane, who's the CEO and co-founder here at Votes. He's our lead technical expert as well on the call tonight. So Nimit, if you'd like to say hello.
Good evening to everybody, and really glad to be here and look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
And then, as was read in the title, Richard Catahan is our general manager here in Canada, and he will be the project sponsor if we're lucky enough to have this voted in favor and get to do business with West Lincoln. So I will turn it over to Richard Catahan to, again, give us an intro, talk a little bit about our experience, and we'll work through these slides.
So thank you. Good evening to the Township of West Lincoln. We're excited to present tonight. Just a little bit about myself. I've been doing online voting since 2012 with over 150 Ontario municipal election with regards to not just online voting, but applications that you're actually currently using right now. I've also done many areas in Canada as well with regards to electronic e-voting and elections and poll books. As you can see, a lot of the clients in the slides are mature clients with regards to the use of online voting. I worked with many of them in the past, 2014 and 2018. And I can tell you the theme this year, why online voting is so popular, is really to address the accessibility issue, people with disabilities. And in fact, when the city clerks showcase vote system to people with disabilities, the councils of people with disabilities. Their reaction is it's about time, because they feel that they've been disenfranchised in previous years. So with the vote system, you'll see the ease of use, but more importantly, you will be able to increase the accessibility to a very distributed member base, and therefore hopefully providing higher participation rate. Because that really is all about, is making sure you don't disenfranchise anyone. So I commend the Township of West Lincoln for not eliminating what you currently have, but adding to what you already have to make sure that no one is disenfranchised. So we see that as a theme. You will also benefit from, if we're blessed to receive this award, that your votes will be protected, because it's already gone underway with regards to Privacy Information Act, impact analysis. That's already being done by the cities and municipalities that you see on this slide. And I think one of the things that you're going to want to ask is Audit Trails. So I'm hoping that in today's slides, we will be able to address accessibilities, casting votes online with increased, accessibility to, like I said, a distributed member. We'll show you that votes are protected, the audit trail, but more importantly, data that you'll see flowing through our voting system, you already have. It's already being stored to products that you are already used to using, which is DataFix, for example. But that'll be on the other slides. So again, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Jesse. I'm Richard Callahan, by the way, even though it's showing us Jesse Andrews on the slide. So my apologies.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And I would just reinforce a couple key trends across those last two election cycles that we're seeing in Ontario, and that's more municipalities are adopting the option for online voting. We're seeing higher participation rates when that is the case. And we're also seeing over cycles, and now that we've seen a couple of these, voters who vote, through the online option, it's very sticky. They come back and they vote in that same manner. So this is, again, really about the voter choice and hopefully creating a better voter experience for voters that want to vote in this manner. That being said, we'll hit on some of the probable questions that we'll get on infrastructure and security. We'll try to address those now. And of course, we'll have Q&A after for specific questions. So with that segue, just want to highlight here that in 2022, this is a modern product, and it's really been enabled by the growth in the cloud industry, cloud computing over the last decade plus. This would have been much harder to do, back in 2010 and before, having to have all the physical servers in your location, in your warehouse, not able to adapt quickly to a different location, different privacy and data laws. So all of that setting enables us to now host this through the cloud, locally in Ontario, within your province. All of that data is held locally. It's compliant with any privacy laws that are happening there in Ontario and in Canada. We also have backups that are local to the province. So actual, again, physical server backups that Votes owns and has in your province. The other thing is this allows us to scale up in terms of infrastructure. On election night, when people are busy and we're getting a lot of votes in, it's not guessing ahead of time how much compute power do we need, how many servers. We're able to actually scale that in real time based on the volume that's coming in. And then lastly, I'll point out this system is resilient, it's redundant. So there are, it's actually 64 nodes or different servers and infrastructure that, again, if one were to go down, one were to be under attack, we're able to shift the resources, again, to unaffected servers and locations. So we're able to maintain uptime. And we've seen that in our elections over the last year. In 2021, one of the big server farms, Amazon US East, went down for a number of hours throughout the day. Again, the system worked as intended. Those compute power in the servers moved to a different location. We had live elections going on in that window, and we didn't experience any downtime. So all of those, things and questions that come around, hey, we've got a busy election night. Will online voting hold up to that? We're very confident, and we believe the system does that. And we especially think this kind of new architecture in the cloud allows it to do it very well. So to dig in a little more beyond infrastructure, talk a little bit about security and accessibility, because oftentimes they're on the same spectrum when it comes to conversations in elections. I'm going to let Nimit talk a little bit about the progress and items that we've accomplished in these areas.
Thanks, Jesse. So as Jesse mentioned, security and accessibility are kind of our twin focus areas. So on the security front, we're constantly pushing the envelope, battle testing the system, both internally as well as with third-party assessment organizations, both in the private sector as well as at the government level. We've also been the first such platform to have completed comprehensive WSTL testing. WSTL, as you may know, it's one of the federal certification labs in the US, which traditionally works only with hardware-based systems. We're the first software-based system to be tested very thoroughly. And we're also in the midst of completing our ISO 27001 certification, which kind of lays the framework for different kinds of policies and scenarios to be done in a very standardized manner. On the accessibility front, we are constantly working with disability groups, organizations such as the National Center for Accessible Media to test the system, both on smart devices as well as on desktops now, tablets as well, to ensure that all kinds of edge scenarios and requirements which are unique to voters with disabilities or anybody who has an accessibility challenge, that those are taken care of without actually compromising the security side. So I'll pause there, and Jesse, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Nimit. I think the only thing I'd add is specifically here in Ontario, we have a working group with those 14 clients that we referenced earlier in the presentation. And the town of Newmarket is leading a third-party cybersecurity audit review. And so West Lincoln would have full access to that review, any details, any of the findings from that we would share with you. So again, it's part of this constant review, constant auditing, and knowing that security is a journey, and we have to maintain that vigilance as we go. Now that we've had a chance to quickly address some of the security and infrastructure and accessibility, just want to paint what the actual picture in the product looks like for voters who are using this. There's different ways to access the system. There's different ways to do online voting. And so the web is kind of the one that you're going to think of the most. You'll get your voter notification letter. You'll have a voter pin and some instructions on how to vote online. But there's also some really other great advantages of using this system. We talked about voters with disabilities. So we additionally have a mobile application that has some of those great features like talkback or voiceover. So you can actually have the ballot read to you if you have visual challenges. You have dictation where you can actually dictate and write in candidates and choices. There's also the adaptive text. So again, everything that you have set to your phone, those settings carry over to the Votes application and improve your ballot experience if you have a disability and would like to use that option. Another potential option is maybe it's a retirement home. Maybe it's a location where people have trouble getting to the polls. Maybe it's a location where people are COVID conscious, health conscious in terms of being exposed. And so through the West Lincoln team and the election administration team, we can actually enable remote balloting, remote voting through tablets. So we can go around and provide support and allow these voters to vote from where they are, what's convenient to them, even if they're not as familiar with or maybe not as tech savvy where they think they need to go and vote online. We can do that and accomplish that for them. And then finally, I'll just say that this is a hybrid approach. The election team at West Lincoln has done a great job in setting up the parameters for this, that this is a choice. If you would still like to go to the polling location and vote on paper, you have that option. And lastly, this landing page you'll see here on the right, that's where we put out all of the voter education. So one easy place for voters to find video tutorial, picture step-by-step walkthrough. We have frequently asked questions, webinars that we'll do in prep and communication for the election window. And lastly, we have contact there. So we have contact through the West Lincoln team as well as our support team that will be available 24/7 during the vote window. And voters that have any questions about how to use this, technical questions, compatibility, we'll have a live person there ready to address that and answer those questions for them. I won't spend time on this slide. I think it's just a quick visual. Again, it's as I mentioned, you'll get your voter notification letter. You've got some instructions there. You've got one or two key numbers and PIN information. And then you'll follow that link to the web application. It's a simple entry form on your voter PIN. You can do secondary information like date of birth, two-factor, different things to increase the security there. And then you'll get to vote through a very intuitive ballot, and you'll get a confirmation code at the end. That ballot's submitted anonymously. There's no voter data tied to it, so we can't tie you to your ballot once it's submitted there. And lastly, that same process, again, is very dynamic in terms of how it appears on your phone, how it appears on your laptop. So from the accessibility side, from the usability side, some very good options there. And then in terms of the auditability, the anonymity of the submission, I'll let Nimit here talk a little bit about some of the logs that we're keeping as well as some of the audit processes we built into the system.
Yep, thanks, Jesse. So one of the features which has become possible, as Jesse mentioned, due to some new technologies that have come about in the last few years, is how do you provide increased auditability and verifiability to a system like this. So we use a distributed ledger-based mechanism where it is possible now for third-party auditors, even if you were to involve citizens, to essentially audit the election. So every oval you mark on the ballot, every square you mark on the ballot is recorded as its unique transaction, anonymous transaction, no voter data is available, yet it allows you to essentially make sure everything's being done the proper way. And once the election's closed, you could also do a tally independent of the official process if you want to enable that level of transparency as well. So depending on how much transparency you want to enable, it's a very flexible mechanism. You also have the ability to have live auditor ballots, which are not counted in the actual tally. So this allows the staff, both the technical as well as the administrative staff, to make sure everything's going okay, especially during peak times. And then the other really unique aspect of a system like this is because it's using an immutable ledger-based mechanism. Once something's written, it can't be tampered with by us, by a third party, by adversary, by administrator, which is quite a bit leg up than using a traditional database system where somebody has, administrative access. That person were to be compromised, then they can tamper with the data. Here, that ability is completely removed because of the checks and balances that are in place. So I'll pause here and hand it back to Jess.
Thank you, Nimit. And so we've got a short presentation. I'd like to wrap it up here. I think as we've discussed, this is an election environment, and there's tools that you're using today that are digital solutions that are helping you run these elections. And that's DataFix, that's Gilmore DocuLink, that's your tabulator service at ES&S. So we think we are the next tool in this environment. Richard, I'll let you kind of comment on how these operate together and allow you to conclude with any final thoughts before we open it up to Q&A.
So first of all, once a year, the Association of Municipal Managers, Clerks, and Treasurers of Ontario, so that stands for AMCTO, but it really is the municipal experts. One of the themes this year is how to implement online voting. So there's 3 areas that must be met: cybersecurity, which we have, infrastructure, which we showed, and project management. I've got over 150. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we feel that we're the experts in that. And then the next question is, how do we implement online voting? The great news is, to implement proper online voting, you have to have good voters list, which you already have, and that is DataFix. We are in real time, full integration with DataFix. They are our friends. We talk to them often, and we ensure that, the collaboration there is 10 out of 10. The second part is, when you're sending letters, it's important to submit proper voter information letters. And usually what's in the voter information letter are contents within DataFix, as well as pins, which is on the online voting piece. So because we integrate in real time with DataFix, we're able to then send very valuable information to DocuLink, which would then combine information from DataFix and votes to get a proper and accurate voter information letter. And then if you did choose tabulators, we've been working with various tabulators, ES&S, Clear Ballots, so we're familiar with that as well, so that, whether it be online voting, tabulator, or phone voting, we're able to ensure that the results are put together as quickly as possible and as accurately as possible. So I'm very proud to see that the Township of West Lincoln already has all of those mature products in place, and that is DataFix, integrating with tabulators, DocuLink, and votes is in real time integrated with all those. So in summary, you have all the components already in place. Jesse?
I think that's great. Thank you, Richard. From the Votes team, again, thank you for the time and the opportunity to present tonight. And we'll open up to the council for a question.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen from Votes. Really appreciate your presentation. We have that item on the agenda just a little bit further down. So if you guys can just stick around, we have to go through consent, and then We're going to go to, I'll read out the item, and then that's probably, I can refer back to some of the members of the committee for some questions towards you gentlemen, because there probably will be. So I'm just asking if you guys could stick around for 5 minutes while we can skip through this and get to the item on the agenda real quickly, if that's okay. I see some nods
Absolutely.
and some thumbs, so I think that's great. Thank you. So, members of committee, we'll move on. Just going to check here with Kevin. Is there anybody that's willing to request items on the agenda, Kevin? Okay, perfect. Moving on to consent agenda items. All items are listed to be considered to be routine and non-controversial and be approved with one resolutions. Item A 27-22, consent agenda items. That the Administration, Fire, and Finance Committee hereby approve the following consent agenda items. Items number 1 and 2 be hereby received for information, and number 2, item 3, and hereby receive and the recommendations contained therein are adopted with the exception of, and do I see any members of committee pulling any of the items? Don't see any hands. I need a mover for that. For these, Mr. Mayor, seconded by Councillor Yonker. All those in favor? And that carries. There's no communication, so we're moving on to staff reports. Deputy Clerk Jessica Dyson and Clerk Joanne Shime. Recommendation report C01 2022 municipal and school board election alternate voting methods. This was an item that was deferred from March 14th to today. The recommendation again reads that the report number C-01 2022 regarding 2022 municipal and school board election alternate voting methods dated March 14, 2022 be received for information, and that the clerk be directed to proceed with the conduct of the 2022 municipal and school board elections, including the use of optional scanned voting tabulators and during the advanced voting period, internet voting, and that council accept the proposal from Votes Canada Limited for the provision of internet voting services as outlined in this report, and that a bylaw authorizing the use of alternate voting methods and advanced voting period in the 2022 municipal and school board elections be presented to council for ratification. So I need a mover for that. I got Councillor Ryan, I need a seconder. I got Councillor Broderick. Now I will turn to members of committees for comments and questions. I see the mayor first. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. And there was some uncertainty in our last meeting when this was first floated, so it was deferred so that we could get to get expertise or at least your opinion on your product. You can do your own sales pitch. So I'm glad that you came out and made the presentation. You know, when just dealing with this in categories, I understand the whole bit about accessibility. I get that. That's not my issue. I have my secondary issue is that and this is a municipal issue, so this is not of your concern either. But I will speak because the motion's on the floor that we're spending approximately $20,000 to do just the advanced polling. You know, I get that we have to dip our toe in, but I still can't justify. I think there were only 600 votes cast in the last election in advanced polls. And I imagine that this will bring out more people, but even if we should double that, that's very costly to get the 600, the delta amount of votes in the advanced poll is still very costly, weighed up against the 20,000. So I still have that reservation, the one that I shared last time. But while you gentlemen are on the call with us, I want to know, when it comes to the auditing, as I hear you explain it, 100% of the auditing is still electronic. Is there a physical ballot anywhere, even kept by the ballot caster, the voter, or is there some kind of physical manifestation of a ballot? Like, how do I mean? I can imagine recounting goes, you know, like, is there an actual way that a physical ballot can be observed?
So I can address that, Mr. Mayor. So we most commonly in Canada and in Ontario, there is not the request or the desire for a paper ballot to be produced from the digital voting solution. for the majority of the elections in the US, there actually is that desire. So we have the capability to produce a paper ballot replicate of the digital vote, and we can do that in real time. And again, sync with the paper tabulator systems like ES&S. We've done that again in the US with this type of implementation. That being said, the proposal to West Lincoln did not include that, and that was not requested in the RFP. So, I leave that kind of decision in terms of implementation to West Lincoln and the team there.
Okay. And you raised you hit the nail on the head. Voting methods in North America have largely been unchanged for, I don't know, let's say 150 or 175, maybe even 200 years. And I would say that for up until the Florida election between Gore and this escapes me. This is really bad because he was President Bush. Thank you. There was a high degree of confidence in the paper ballot, and I think ultimately what ended up happening in Florida actually confirmed the validity of the paper ballot system because it was so close. I think that we would all agree that there's been a great decline in the electoral process since the last election, and whether you believe that the votes were fair or the votes were not fair, there's a high degree of skepticism that has been built in as we move to a less physical and more electronic voting. So it's very concerning to me. I'm not concerned about the whole overall election results, but I do express concerns with this general trend towards e-voting. I think I will always, I'm fairly young, I consider myself, part of the computer generation. And yet there are still things that I like to have tangible. I still handle a lot of cash in my wallet. I still drive a car with a, steering column that's connected to a rack and pinion that turns the wheels with the help of hydraulics. And I understand that live wire cars and planes and stuff like that are they tell me, statistically speaking, that they're more safe, but there's still something about the physicality of a paper ballot. So I still have that reservation. I understand what you're saying, and your pitch deals with the accessibility, and I can't change that. So I'm not necessarily speaking to the votes, gentlemen. You answered your question. I'm just kind of speaking to the motion because that's what's before us. I still will be voting against this for those reasons: the cost per ballot increase and the lack of a paper ballot, something tangible that can be audited, physically speaking. So again, thank you for your presentation, and I'll yield the floor back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for those comments and questions there as well, Mr. Mayor. Members of committee, anybody else? Okay, I got Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and and thank you for your presentation there. I'm sitting here listening to the mayor talk about democracy and the current cost that this could put on our community and our taxpayers. But I guess I can't help but put the question out there in terms of, I don't know, how do you put a price on democracy? We're being asked, was it about just under $20,000 or give or take, versus we're not being asked for $2 million or $200,000. I think the one big thing we got a mandate for this term was to improve accessibility on many fronts, and transparency and accountability and the balance and checks that are in place. And I can't help but wonder if this is something that can just fight the price tag. And $20,000 isn't anything to disregard. It's certainly a lot of money, but when you look at,
just to be clear, the actual price is not 20,000, right? I know we're throwing around 20,000. Am I correct? It was 18 and
yes.
something, correct, Madam CAO, if possible? Sorry to put or Madam Clerk, because I know the numbers. Sorry to put you on the spot there, Madam CEO. I should have went to the clerk, but just to be clear, like we're throwing around the price of, and the mayor did, and
Yeah,
I think we're rounding up. The price was 18,000. I think came in at votes. Did not. Sorry,
It's right here.
Miss Deputy Clerk. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the amount that came in through votes was $18,408.92.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was just kind of backing off with the mayor, so he rounded up to 20,000, so I thought it was just simpler to refer to it that way. But again, can you put a price on democracy, for $18,400? And it's something that would certainly ensure more voices are heard and represented, and I think that's an important factor as well. We're being given a presentation here that shows all the safeguards in place, and I'm hearing maybe not directly or indirectly, but we're now potentially comparing West Lincoln election to the American elections, which I think is not a fair comparison in any capacity. And so my concerns around that are going to obviously be different. I certainly don't share that opinion with the mayor by any means. I think elections held in Canada are a lot more. I don't think we have nearly the amount of mistrust that some other people have in some other countries that we do in our elections, and it could just be because of the infrastructure that's in place. So I think this would be, for what it's worth, and the residents I have heard that have reached out and have at least expressed concerns with the election in terms of being immunocompromised and what that's going to look like, and being concerned that they're not going to have an opportunity to go and vote in person because of their choice. And I feel like this is a choice. By having this forward, doesn't prevent someone from still going and voting in person, and even should something unforeseen happen in the advanced polling and they're unable to vote and they call the tech support and tech support can't help them for reasons, again, unforeseen, they can still go back and cast their vote in person. And so I really don't see any reason not to support this because, again, I think this only ensures that more voices are heard and more people are accurately represented. And we're in a time where we're still dealing with a pandemic. And so a lot of people haven't returned back to normality. And this might actually help them still feel like they have a voice where many might not vote just because of the uncertainty of how that's going to look. And we don't know what their health situation is and how that's going to impact them. And again, it's I think it's certainly something we should be prioritizing in this election. I realize maybe we might not see the same voter turnout that that would naturally be expected, because I think a lot of people maybe they are unsure about how this is going to work from the minute they click versus handing a physical ballot into the box. But I think this is kind of like the stepping stone towards what the next election might be, which is probably going to store more public confidence as we embrace the 21st century a little bit further here in West Lincoln. I think I guess I can't speak for everybody, but I certainly know myself, I like to see us get a little bit more modernized, and I think this is one step towards that. And I certainly want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to democratically represent their voice and their vote, and I think this really will produce that. And again, I don't think you can put a price on democracy. I think if anything, if we had to spend a little bit extra on something, this is certainly one area we should, to ensure that the right voices are the right people have the right voices representing themselves. So at this time, Mr. Chair, I'll definitely be supporting this. And I think those are all my comments for now.
Yeah, perfect. I'll go to the rest of the members of the committee. I have Councillor Bradrick, then I got Councillor Ganan.
Thank you, Chair. First, a question to votes. I'm not sure which gentleman would like to take that. And I apologize if you did already explain this in your technical jargon, then it went right over my head. But the audit of the ballots, is that something that happens at the end on voting day? Or is there an ongoing process that happens? So if is there a way that would trigger like an alert that perhaps there is fraudulent voting happening if you see a series of ballots coming in from perhaps somewhere in the world that doesn't make sense? Is there something that triggers some kind of reaction from your system to put that in check, or is that something that waits until voting day?
That's a great question. Happy to address that. So one of the built-in features into the platform is basically 24/7 security monitoring. So there's multi-level monitoring happening. So you gave the example of, potentially adversarial or unauthorized people trying to access from a certain part of the world. So the first level of monitoring that's happening is, at the network level. So there's already programmed information about, known bad networks. So we are actually part of the MSISAC, which is, getting information from the Five Eyes network, which is basically the governments of Canada, US, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. So there's already a vast database of, fraudulent networks, adversarial IP addresses, and those are refreshed on a weekly basis. So that's already programmed into the system. So that's one level. The second level is, pattern-based matching. So let's say there's a group of individuals who are trying to randomly feed in the data, test it out and see if they can somehow get in. So those are detected. If somebody tries to do more than 3 times, they'll get flagged. They won't be able to proceed. There's CAPTCHA built in. There's on the mobile and the tablet applications, malware detection. If you're using an unsafe wireless network, it'll prompt you and force you to go to a safer network. So it gives you an example of what we call as a layered defense. So depending on the scenario, depending on the device, different kind of checks are in place. And there is a dashboard which is provided to the IT teams, your local staff as well, who will get visibility into where is the traffic coming from. So suddenly 6 p.m. you see traffic coming from a certain part of the world which doesn't fit the pattern, it'll automatically get blocked. There'll be alerts appearing on the screen as well as through emails and other logs. Similarly, if a certain individual is trying to use different pins, you'll get that as a different pattern alert. So all that's inbuilt and already in place. Another level is distributed denial of service attacks. So as Jesse mentioned earlier, there's already provisions to handle those kinds of nation level threats as well. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the capabilities in place, and we are constantly battle testing this, simulating this. We also typically propose to do what we call as a tabletop exercise with your staff. So a couple of months prior to the election, we will war game these scenarios. Let's say on election day or 10 days prior, XYZ events start to happen. How will you react? This is the best practice. This is how the mitigation happens. So just to give another example of both technical as well as procedural and administrative safeguards that are in place already.
Oh, thank you very much for that thorough answer. It's very helpful to know the depth of the security, and it gives a fulsome understanding, I think, of some of the cost implications when you're looking at the price tag of just over $18,000. It certainly is probably over the heads of a lot of us that are sitting here today. I just have another comment too, Chair, that I'm excited about this opportunity for various reasons. One of those for accessibility, as I think we're all on board about that, but also for perhaps maybe some of our younger citizens in our community that they may be more motivated when they have this opportunity that is easier for them to do their civic duty and vote, other than their mother dragging or father dragging them by their ears to the polling station on election day. I'm excited about the opportunity that may help increase voter turnout, and I will be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Broderick. Councillor Ganan?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. To the Deputy Clerk, please.
Jessica?
I have a question. Hi, Jessica. Thank you. So I just want to verify, since the mayor raised the issue of the cost, have this cost of having an online voting opportunity, has that already been factored into the allocation for the budget for the election for 2022?
Thank you, Councillor Ganan, for the question. Yes, it has been allocated and has been outlined in the report as well. So an allocation of 130,000 towards the election expenditures which was fully funded through the transfer from the election reserve. The cost of the internet voting would be within the approved budget.
Thank you. I was quite certain I'd read that, but I wanted your verification out loud, so thank you very much for that. And I have a question for somebody from Votes as well, please. Just a very simple answer that I want to be able to respond if somebody asks me to, if somebody uses the online voting portal and they're able to do that, how do we keep track of having their name removed from the voters list and making sure that therefore they're not going to also arrive at the polls later on if they've already voted? So in layman's terms, whoever can answer that, please, so that we can then respond to those who ask us that question.
Sure, thank you, Councillor Game. Whoever wants to take that in, I guess she said layman's terms because I need it for myself as well. So go ahead.
Sure, happy to take a crack at that. So as you may have seen from the presentation, the voter information resides in a system called DataFix, which you're already using. And so we have the online voting system has a real-time integration with that. So as soon as you submit your ballot using the online interface, a signal goes to DataFix where you, the elector, is marked as having already voted. So then if you try to go in person on election day or try to vote again using a different online interface, you will be instantly blocked because the staff will be able to see you as having already voted on the DataFix system, which is basically the system of record as far as the voter information is concerned. So that's how double voting is prevented in the whole process.
Thank you for that. So like my colleagues, I'm very, very pleased the fact that young people will be able to vote. I think this will be very appealing to them. But I actually am most impressed with the fact that people with disabilities, whether they're permanent disabilities or just somebody waiting for their knee to be replaced and needing some kind of surgery and feeling that they can't get out to vote, are able to vote online. So thank you very much for this
Thank you,
presentation.
Councillor Canan. Any other members of the committee with any comments or questions? Councillor Yonker?
Yeah, sorry. So I think through you, Mr. Chair, to one of the gentlemen there. Basically, then, from what I understand,
just talking to the mic. Hold on there, Councillor Yonker. Can you talk into the mic because you kind of faded out a bit there? So just want to make sure you get your question across. There you go.
So basically, what I understand then is, as soon as somebody votes, there's already a system that we use called data links. That when we go to the polls, the people sitting at the table, they have that list in front of them, and that list comes off of data links, correct? And then, so they won't even, their name won't even be on there, or would it just be showed as crossed off and voted? Is how I understood that, even though it's pretty straightforward. And then, yeah, I'm still when the does everybody get a pin? Is that how it works? That if of all the residents, will we be getting a pin saying this is your pin to vote on this system, or does it actually go that people need to request a pin to vote?
So I can address that, Councillor Yonker. The default would be, like you said, DataFix has all of the voter information, whether it be through the online voting channel or through voting in person at a polling location. Like you said, with the real-time integration, any voter data when it comes to voting on election day will be updated. Your record would show up as crossed off in the voter list if you were to go and try to vote in person. And then, like you said, a voter pin is created for every eligible voter. That is included in the voter notification letters that go out. If you're voting online, you would use that voter pin to access the system and submit your ballot online. If you're going to vote in person, you won't even need it. You can simply show up to the polling location. We see that you're still on the voter list as having not voted. Therefore, you're able to go in, vote on paper like you normally would.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, because yeah, we are talking that these young people like to take the easy way out, but I think with a system like this, it would be wise if we promote these young people to go out and vote, right? That can. I think that's still a good thing. It's you know good practice and but yeah, I'm not sure how I'm going to vote yet, but I do understand the value that everybody gets to vote, but at the same time, I think the mayor brings up a good question. How many people are we reaching with this $20,000? So still sitting here thinking. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Yonker. Okay, I don't see any other members of the committee. So I have a few questions, and actually direct questions to the members of votes. It was sort of me who kind of pushed to get you guys through this committee to come in and have a presentation. So it's only fitting that I have the questions that I had at that meeting I can ask now. So to either to Mr. Sane or Mr. Andrews, and I'll just read what I had here. So coming as a rural councillor, what kind of internet speed is required for voting? We have many residents on rural internet, which is a real problem. Like even with and you can say, well, you can use your phone with data, but we know how the world works. These people are going to come home from work. They're usually tying into their Wi-Fi at home, and they're really not going to be flipping back between data and Wi-Fi when they're trying to get a vote in on time. So how sufficient is the system with rural internet? If anyone can answer that question.
Yeah, happy to address that. So the data and bandwidth requirements of the system are very minimal. So the system's actually being used in very low bandwidth scenarios in several parts of the world. We're also already contracted with some other jurisdictions in Ontario who have a similar requirement of, pockets of their jurisdiction where the internet bandwidths are fairly low. And so the requirements are very minimal. So it should work fine on even a dial-up type internet connection as well. And if you do have alternative, like you mentioned, a data connection on your phone, you can obviously use that. But it works quite sufficiently on very low speed, low bandwidth connections as well, because there isn't any huge amount of data that's getting transmitted. Either way, it's very compact, everything's encrypted, and it's transmitted in a very efficient channel.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that answer. Again, and you touched on, I had a kind of question about ensuring duplicate voting. You already answered that question. But what happens if there is a security breach? Are those, let's say there's one security breach in the advanced voting, are those votes that the advanced voters all, let's just say, casted are invalid, and they are notified that they can actually go vote again? What happens if there has been a security breach with your services?
So that's a great question. So it actually depends on the nature of the security incident. So a breach, by definition, would be very serious. So a breach would mean something bad has happened, something's being compromised. So in that scenario, yes, we would recommend, basically clearing out the process and starting from scratch or using an alternative method. But that being said, we've never had a successful breach on the system. That's not to say it's not possible, nothing's 100%, but we work with, levels of risk mitigation and the safeguards that are built into the system. There are, as we talked earlier, there's a layered defense mechanism. So there's defense at the perimeter, which is the network. There's defense at the second layer, then at the application, the device which the user is using. And so because of all the proactive monitoring that's happening, if somebody were to attempt a breach, it would get detected before it actually caused any damage, which would lead to the worst case scenario you were highlighting. So we feel very, very confident that, before it even gets to that stage, there'll be enough alarms and red lights going around that, the system would be able to roll out countermeasures, both automatically and through the staff and the teams to basically prevent that kind of worst case scenario from happening. But if it were to happen, God forbid, then there is actually what we call as a disaster recovery plan. So that's one of the scenarios that we look at. And if the worst case scenario were to happen, there's a series of steps on how you can potentially recover. And a recovery is not possible, then you countermand the whole thing and start from fresh, or direct everybody to a alternative voting channel. So that's the absolute worst case scenario. We've never seen that happen, but we are prepared for it.
Okay.
And I would just add very briefly to what Nimit said is, again, we're very confident. We hope that we'll never see this scenario. But we would most likely, the way that you have it structured here is you have an advanced voting window, which is great. It doesn't overlap with voting on election day for people coming to the polls to vote on paper. So as Nimit said, we go through that disaster recovery, and disaster communication plan to say, this has been invalidated. These are the updates you need. You're going to be given the information you need to vote on election day. Go through the inconvenience, go through the voter education to get them up to speed. So the most likely scenario would probably be invalidating and directing people to the in-person paper option.
Okay.
Again, we hope not to see that, but that's what we would do realistically.
Okay, perfect. I just had to ask that question. Obviously it's an important one, so you guys answered that sufficiently enough for me. The other question I had, I noticed that you had on your list there a bunch of kind of similar size municipalities like ours. What's been the increase in turnout for voting? Obviously, I've seen you had Petawa and all those other municipalities. I don't know the list that you had, but on your slideshow there, what is the increase in voter turnout using your services?
So a number of those are new clients for us for the selection cycle here in Ontario. I might turn to Richard to talk a little bit about some of the historical numbers that we've seen across, maybe new markets, one example where you have historical data. Richard.
Okay. So just further on that, Richard, sorry, Richard, anything like in our size, if you can if you have that you've previously done, if I'm looking at numbers wise.
So based on my experience, like I said, doing over 150, they've gone anywhere from doubling to tripling. Why is that? So in most cases, when they choose online voting, it's usually an option. Okay, so it's hybrid. And so what happens is after they've done a couple of cycles of hybrid, they then take a look at the cost benefit analysis, which I heard today about, does it save time or money? And so based on what I've seen, they then calculate the traditional paper voting, which obviously need supply of paper ballots. And by the way, there is a shortage of paper today, big time. There's postage. And as you know, Canada Post likes to go on strike at election time, and printing. Plus it requires extra manpower for counting votes through the show of hands and stuff like that. So then they start to reduce some of the option and they start conducting of electronic votes. And what they've seen with conducting electronic votes after one election or so is it increases the reduction of implementation costs. And then there's efficiency of the election management, which means, accurate and instant results with precision. So based on those savings, that they're doing, because they're now conducting online voting and they're more mature, they're spending that money now using the paper and all that. They're spending that money now in terms of public relations, texting people that election is coming up. So for example, at City Markham, which I conducted in 2014 and 2018, they were scratching their head why it hasn't increased. But then after finding out and spending some time now with regards to, texting their voters, they found out that the majority, 95% of the taxi drivers, did not know that the actual election had a deadline of this date. So it's a gradual thing to say, does it increase because of online voting? Or online voting is just an ingredient in allowing you to save some time by eliminating other things so that you can focus in ensuring everyone's aware of the election process, when it starts, continuously telling them, you got 10 days to go, 9, et cetera, et cetera. So I've seen it double and triple, and a lot of these mature clients have now gone to just pure online voting because they've matured. But the proper way is the way you're doing it, is through a hybrid approach and determining those stats so that you can be data informed of your decision for next time. If you don't try it, how can you measure, right? Disenfranchising in a lot of the seminars that I've heard city clerks have done, which I was privileged to attend, there's no cost attached to it, right? Because disenfranchising, what does that mean for that election? So,
Okay.
So I've not seen it decrease.
Okay.
I've seen it increase.
So that's a good thing. So this is my final question. You mentioned in your presentation that you have a tablet that you'll go around with. Maybe I misunderstood something, but you have a tablet application that you can go around with for accessibility. That if people need help voting, you'll bring that. Is that you're saying that you're bringing that tablet to them? How does that work? Maybe I misunderstood the presentation.
So I can address that, Counselor. There's a couple different options here. Because it's online, it's accessible from your laptop, from your phone, from your tablet. But specifically for voters who maybe have accessibility needs, or voters who might fall on the elderly or long-term care end of the spectrum, this is something through the election team at West Lincoln that could actually be taken around and provided at some of these longer-term care facilities, some of these assistance center style of voting, where we can actually go to the voter and help them record their vote online, so they don't have to go to the poll. So that would be specifically for someone who maybe doesn't want to go to the poll, maybe isn't as confident in using the system as they want to be, but they could still be helped and assisted in their location using one of those channels and methods that we have.
Okay, perfect. That's all my questions I had. Thank you for answering them. I know I kind of threw a bunch at you there, so thank you for waiting around.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
can I just call a recorded vote?
Yeah, so Madam Clerk, we do have a recorded vote from Councillor Riley.
Thank you. Oops, sorry.
I don't, sorry, because we got so far in the questions in this presentation, I forgot the mover and the seconder for you, so I don't know if you have that written down, Madam Clerk.
I believe it's myself and Councilor.
Yes, I do. It's Councillor Riley and moved by Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Braderick.
Okay. So you got, members of committee, you have the recommendation in front of you here. Before we cast the vote, well, I can say now I'd like to thank Votes for coming out and answering our questions thoroughly. A lot more knowledge I got on breach and data and a lot of 'cause a lot of software questions that I didn't really have a good background. I got more of a civil construction background, but not software applications, so in that field. But I'd like to thank you for coming out and answering our questions. So I'll turn to the clerk, I guess, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just going to take this back up because I lost my screen just a sec.
Sure, take your time, no worries.
Okay. Okay, so I'll open it up for the recorded vote. Councillor Riley?
Support.
Thank you. Councillor Bradrick?
Support.
Thank you. Councillor Ganaan?
Support.
Councillor Jonker?
Support.
Councillor Rayner?
Support.
Mayor Balsma?
Opposed.
Thank you. And Chair Trombetta?
Support.
Thank you. The vote was 6-1, carried.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, everybody, for tonight's presentation. So we'll move on. Moving on, members of committee. Councillor Yonker, for discussion, Township of West Lincoln COVID-19 vaccination policy. So, Councillor Yonker, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, I would just like to be able to have a discussion on our vaccine policy when it comes to the employees. So I'm wondering if we can. Do we need to vote on that, or,
Yeah,
or
so
do
that was my mistake. I jumped ahead about their discussion. So, Madam Clerk, do I need a vote for this? I know it says for discussion.
No, we don't. I do not have a resolution on the table.
That's what I thought. So
it's not a new item of business. It was requested by Councillor Jonker to include this item under other business this evening for discussion.
Okay,
is
so
what I understood.
Again, I'll just keep Councillor Yonker. Go ahead. I'll give you the floor. Is yours.
Yeah, considering the as of March 14th, the Ontario government has lifted or actually removed the vaccine mandate policy, and as well considering the amount of vaccinated people in the Niagara region. I know the last report that we had from the region was 77%, and that was when it was twice, like double vaccinated. And I'm just saying that I believe that we need to remove this policy, because when you look at it, when you look at the numbers, basically only a quarter of our residents cannot apply for a job here in our own township, and to me that's concerning, especially when you consider our volunteer fire department. A quarter of the residents of our township cannot apply to be a volunteer firefighter. And yeah, we're supposed to be creating a diverse and equal opportunity atmosphere, and I don't believe that the policy is doing that anymore. So I would like to see that we remove this vaccine mandate.
So I will direct your question, I guess, to not, because obviously, as a counselor, I don't sit on the EOC or have any involvement on the EOC who makes these decisions, nor have I ever since the start of the pandemic. So I have no say on this at the moment, Councillor Yonker, so I'm going to pass somebody who sits on the EOC as the CAO, or the chief, or who would like to take on this question for Councillor Yonker.
Sorry, I don't know why I automatically turned off my camera. So
no
sorry.
worries.
I'll start it off, but of course, as you mentioned, the AOC is quite a large group. It reflects all of the organization, and I appreciate Councillor Yonker's question or request. What I'm going to say is that West Lincoln is committed to providing a safe and healthy work environment, including reducing the risk of COVID infection for employees. And vaccination against COVID is a pillar, much as wearing masks and social distancing has been, of the public health guidance that we've received and a key to providing a safe environment for our employees and those whom they come in contact with. And Councillor Yonker, I know that you get the general, I guess the information that's published in the paper, but as CAO, I receive the epidemiological data weekly from public health. And vaccination rates in West Lincoln lag the regional average quite substantially. For the first dose, they're lagging by about 12%. By second dose, they're lagging by about 11%. And it's reasonable to conclude from that means that there's a higher risk of exposure and potential infection. So, which is being the context for the decision at the administrative level to keep the vaccine policy in place. And I'll leave it at that at this point. So yeah, right now from the administration put the policy in place, and right now we have no specific reason, especially with the sixth wave that's in place or that we're in the middle of, and the fact that at a staff level we have 100% compliance.
Councillor Yonker, the floor is still yours. Before you, Mr. Mayor, his floor is still his. So.
Yeah, I guess the one question I did want to ask as well is, has it not the emergency act been lifted for COVID? So that's what I was going to ask. Then the next question was, why are we still under an emergency committee, or if the emergency's been active? Am I correct in that? I believe it has been lifted, so I would understand that the emergency EOC would be done.
Madam CAO.
I'm going to start it off. Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Yonker, through you, Councillor Trombetta. I also see that our CEMC, Dennis Fisher, has put his screen on, and he'll be adding to this as well. While the emergency order was lifted, we have continued to meet, and there's not a necessary correlation with that emergency order coming off that the EOC stops. So since that time, we've been meeting probably every other week. We used to meet 3 times every 2 weeks for the last few months, and now we've gone down to every other week. But then actually 2 weeks ago, we actually called a special meeting because of new data that was coming in. So they're 15 minutes long. It's an opportunity for us to gather together and look at the situation and make sure that we're able to respond to the new information accordingly. So maybe with that, I can turn it over to our CEMC, Dennis Fisher.
So I think that, Councillor Jonker, you have a good question. Under the Emergency Act, just because you terminate the emergency, that doesn't mean everything just comes to a screeching halt and everything stops and, you put all your papers away and everything's done. That's not how it works. Unfortunately, we should be debriefing on the last 2 years. We call the hogwash in layman's terms, but we should be debriefing on, what we did, what we could have done better, that whole stuff. That hasn't been done yet. And I think that, we're only meeting every other week now. And the fact is that even though the termination is gone, we are seeing a fair number of staff over the last 2 or 3 weeks that have got infected, that are off for 5 days in isolation, which staff have to deal with in respect to service level. So as I can appreciate everybody wants this to go away, me included, because we're all tired. We've been at it for 2.5 years now, but we still have an obligation and to provide a service level and to protect staff, and we still have to continue to look at staff are still getting infected, what does that look like from a business continuity planning, and make sure that we have enough staff to provide the services that the municipality is looking for. So will we get done having meetings? Yes, but at this point, with the way the infection rate is right now, and it looks like things have been going in waves with the season. So in the fall and winter, in December and January, infection rate was high. The spring kind of comes in, it kind of tapers out. The summer comes in, everybody's outside, so it's not as much, and then it ramps up in the fall again. So you're going to see, infection rate may go up until the better part of the spring and summer, and then it'll tail off. But for us, I think, if you want an opinion from me, we still have to maintain some kind of communication at the EOC level right now, just to maintain service level and staffing levels.
Thank you, Chief, for those comments. Councillor Yonker, the floor is still yours.
Yeah, well, and that's what I find a little bit interesting. We have a vaccine mandate saying everybody's got to be vaccinated.
Losing your Councillor Yonker.
Yeah.
Sorry,
my internet's.
Yeah, you're just fading away a bit. So.
Okay, and yeah, so the vaccination policy, you're saying you have 100% vaccination rate, and yet you're still getting infected, and that's where people in the township are saying, well, yeah, this doesn't work, so I'm not going to get vaccinated. And we are getting emails, and there's some businesses and some of residents are concerned and frustrated that they cannot apply for a job. And that is discrimination against somebody on their choice of health. And I think that's something that we need to really address. And I am concerned too that we're still saying, okay, well, even though the Emergency Act has been lifted, the emergency has been passed. We were done with the emergency, yet we're still thinking that we still have to have this committee dealing with this when it should be. I think it should be dealt with as council. So I'll leave it as that.
Thank you, Councillor Yonker. I just because I didn't want to jump ahead of you, Mr. Mayor. I thought I saw Councillor Rayner's hand go up prior to yours. I just want to make sure. Can I just double check that? Councillor Rayner, did you or did you not?
Not there.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, so I'm glad this discussion came up. I'm somewhat indifferent whether the EOC meets or not meets. I've always been challenged the idea that the EOC could write policy for the town that the township, was compelled under. I've raised that issue before. I very early on in the EOC, I had members of this council, say, well, where are the checks and balances? And the fact is, it's council that does make the policies and the changes. And so I've always objected to the fact that the policy was never under the scrutiny of the council to ask questions, because different municipalities have come up with different policies that allow flexibility for their employees. And likewise, I know just recently that as the city of Hamilton was slated to terminate those employees who had not been vaccinated. By May 31st, they were going to terminate all the remaining employees who had not been vaccinated upon consideration and a direction from a court. They have dropped that, and that just happened this past week. In other words, what we're finding across the nation in municipalities, they had no authority to require it, and no authority to mandate it, and no authority to fire anybody for not getting the vaccine. So that I hope doesn't come back to haunt us, but that's another issue again. Chief, you mentioned, and Councillor Jonker brought it up, that arguably the township has 100% compliance, vaccine compliance. I find that a little odd, because I know some of the the staff have reported to me directly saying that they're not. And that's just in casual conversations that they're not vaccinated. So I don't exactly know where the discrepancy lies, how you're counting that. But regardless, as Councillor Jonker noted, people are still getting sick. And that raises the very real scientific fact that being vaccinated does not prevent one from getting COVID, from being hospitalized, or even dying. It's a well-known fact that people who are vaccinated do get COVID. They are hospitalized, and remarkably, they're hospitalized, and if you go to the Ontario statistics, they're hospitalized at almost the same rate as the vaccine rate. Which means there's statistically no difference between being vaccinated and not vaccinated. So there's some scientific facts that are emerging after 2 years. And I think that speaks to the fact that, okay, we're learning. We've done this for 2 years. And science is coming up with new information, new data, coupled with the fact that Pfizer themselves released 9 pages of side effects. That's their documentation on the mRNA jab. So it's actually gene therapy, and I've had this discussion with our own Dr.
Mr. Mayor,
Hergy.
Mr. Mayor, listen, I know this is a passionate. Hold on, let me finish, Mr. Mayor. I know it's a passionate topic, and I know I don't want to get into all the specifics about what we were 2 years ago. We're talking about, where we are now. And,
okay, so let me continue. If I could, I'll wrap this up. I'm coming home.
Make it quick because I got the CAO that's trying to respond to some of the questions. So stick in the moment that we are now. Let's not get back 2 years before.
The other, okay, so what I'm going to say that now that we've been in this for 2 years, we realize that this pandemic, while the label might stick, is becoming more endemic, which means it's becoming like the flu or the cold. We learn to live with it. Having said that, if that's indeed the case, that eventually this will change from pandemic to endemic, we ought to be changing our policies too. I realize our policies were developed at a time, when it was a pandemic, but as an endemic, we would never prevent anybody from working, and we haven't in the past, from working with without a flu shot or coming to work, staying home for 14 days after showing symptoms of a cold. So let's just be consistent. So finally, I guess the chief end of this discussion, in my opinion, ultimately is to allow council, all the council members to represent their constituents properly in the chambers. I think that's ultimately what we want is our employees. And unfortunately, I don't know why council was included in the employees, because we're elected officials, so we are in a different category. Nevertheless, I think we need to all return and represent all of our constituents, vaxxed and unvaxxed, in the council chambers. And so that's where I think we need to have the discussion. We could talk about, as I have a long time, about various, geopolitical and scientific and health and safety, but we keep throwing up health and safety, and it's just not a real, it's not supported by data or science.
Okay, so
I'll leave it there for now. Let's see what
that's fine. I just didn't want to get into that whole other side of, we're just, and I'm glad you kind of summed it up at the end with the I want to stay in the moment that we're at that we are in right now, Mr. Mayor. So I'm going to turn this to Madam CAO. She has her hand up. Go ahead, Madam CAO.
So through you, Council or Chair Trombetta, to Mayor Bilsma, a couple things I want to raise. I can't actually do this in any particular order because you were sort of all over, but First one would be a real concern about the chain of command and you having discussions with staff about some of these matters. I've talked to you about that before,
Yep.
and I'll have to go back to those staff again because it's really contrary to the way we work here. So that's one. Your question about council having control. We've brought these items to council now twice, and there's been a unanimous vote of support by council. So that was the vote, and I'll leave it at that. You had asked about why council members were included, and council members were included with employees as they're paid for their position, and they're eligible for other benefits that they get just as staff do. So that was sort of the rationale behind that. Oops, sorry. About and then I'm not going to argue with you about science on this because that's I've been following the advice of our medical officer of health. When Dennis was talking about people being sick and the fact that they have to actually then stay home, they're milder cases because they have been vaccinated, and from business continuity, they only have to stay home for 5 days, and that's the public health guidance on that. So rather than having people who are out of commission for much longer because they haven't been vaccinated, and that's a ruling that comes from public health, not from us. This is what they're told to do. So that's another, I think, point in favor of doing this. And then I have spoken to Dr. Hergy about when we will be moving to the endemic. And you're right, something like this would go to an endemic stage, but not yet. We've just hit another wave again. And, if everything goes well, maybe in the fall we'll be there. And we will continue to monitor this, and we will continue to make sure that we're protecting everything appropriately. And yeah, we have a duty, and as an employer, we have a duty under the Occupational Health and Safety Act to protect our employees, period.
So, Mr. Chair, then just a couple of
hold on, Mr. Mayor. I see Councillor Rayner's hand, and he hasn't spoken tonight once at all. So I'd like to turn to him for one thing. Go ahead, Councillor Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't understand why we're continuing with this discussion. We're not going to change anything. Everything is set as the CAO said. Science has proven the safest way is through vaccinations, and it's not just with COVID. We've had vaccinations for tuberculosis, for smallpox, for measles. Vaccinations have been going on for centuries, and there's a reason for them because they prevent massive death. And that was the reason behind this. It's just something that's not new. It's something that's been done for many, many times over many, many years. We have the policies. The CAO has stood by them, which is what she's supposed to. The chief has also supported it. We're not going to make any changes tonight. Let's not waste any more time. Let's just move on because it's not going to change anything by talking for the next 3 hours. What we've got is what we're going to do. And until the medical officer of health changes everything, I don't believe the CAO nor Mr. Fisher is prepared to make any changes that would be contrary to the medical officer of health that we follow. So that's, to me, it's simple. This is just wasting time.
Thank you.
Chair,
okay, I'll go back to you now. Do you want the floor, Mr. Mayor? You have your hand up.
Yeah.
I had to give him, Mr. Mayor. I have to, he hasn't spoken. He has the right to speak.
Well, I realize that, but the floor is the floor. Like whoever has
you never still had the floor. You never still had the floor, and it's my ruling to say if you do. So now, if you'd like to speak, I can go back to you. If you're going to be, if you're going to be cranky about it, I'll go to somebody else. Are you going to speak or not?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm going to speak. So now I had 3 points, but because of the interruption, I did lose 2 of them. I was going to say, giving tacit general support to the EOC for the work that they do is not necessarily approving the policy that they developed for the municipality. So I just kind of want to get that on the books. At least that's not how I did it. I know what it was like for those members on the EOC inside, and I respect that work and effort. That, however, in no way, and the way that the motions were presented to council, no one endorsed the fact that they had come up with a policy. And so I still object to the policy being a municipal policy that hasn't been properly vetted and discussed by the council. So I just want to say that. Second thing is, I have talked to Dr. Hergy about the trend, and the reality is, guess what? As soon as we get through this wave, it will taper off, but come November and December, we will have another wave, and then again in March, because this is very cyclical and it follows the same cycles that colds and flus do. November, December, and then again in March. And Dr. Hergy confirmed, in fact, that that is indeed the case. And if you need that confirmation, he stated it publicly at the last public meeting, public health meeting update that he did about 2.5 weeks ago. All that to say that this is responding like endemic disease. And I think that we need to sit up and take notice of what other municipalities are doing. I know Grimsby and Pelham recently adjusted their policies to reflect the changes at the province, and I know Hamilton has as well. So I think it's about time that we adjusted and recognized these changes as well.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for those comments. Again, it's not us, it's the EOC that's making these policies, and we're all aware. Just when the beginning of the pandemic, I came to you and I had my questions, and I was told to butt out by yourself while you were on the EOC because I wasn't a part of the EOC.
I didn't use the word butt out, not even close.
Well, sorry, I'm out of my jurisdiction. Maybe I'll use that word. Whatever word you want me to use, Mr. Mayor, that I'll use. So when you were on the EOC at that time, I was told the same thing. So again, I have no say on this thing as a councillor. So again, it's going to come down to the EOC and their decisions. Councillor Yonker, go ahead.
I yield the floor.
Yeah, and that's what I do wonder is that's the biggest issue that I do have. We have a policy in place.
Can't hear you, Councillor.
My mic is maybe, I'm just trying a new computer, and I guess the mic is not the
Yeah, if you talk close to it, we can hear you. Just keep your face closer, yeah.
Yeah, then my face is like big on the screen, but
it's okay.
Yeah, but I think what we do have to realize is that this is discriminating against a quarter of our residents. And I think that's what we need to really understand. And that's what I have been getting from residents is I can't even apply in my own town. And I just said to them, I get your frustration because I can't even go into a meeting right now because of my health status. And we can go around the table for hours on the merits of vaccination versus vaccination, and that's not my intent tonight. But it is pretty sad when you have your family members who are triple vax and are still getting COVID, and just as bad as. And what we're ignoring is the fact that the Omicron variants. The doctors, when they found it in Africa, they very clearly stated it is nothing more than a very serious cold. And yet we are treating it like it is the first wave. And that's what we're not adjusting. And that's what I would like to see, that we adjust our vaccination policy because of the variances. And just like science shows every time, you're going to see it every year, a cycle exactly like what we're going to see continually up and down with numbers. And we need to adjust our policy to reflect the fact that it's an endemic.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Younger. It was kind of muffled, but we kind of got the gist of it. It's a little tough to hear you, but it's not your fault. It's like the new computer, like you said. Councillor Bradrick.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to have a fulsome discussion around the table, but I also appreciate the fact of why the EOC was put into place in the first place, and that there is not a political opportunity for the direction of those decisions. So I think that's an important fact that we need to remind ourselves of, that during an emergency, we do not need to be playing any kind of have any political motivation for decisions, and I'm thankful for the way that that is set up. I do have a question for our CAO or Chief Fisher in regards to council and the status of council being in the same realm as staff, has there been any thoughts going forward as we continue through this, if we're to be in that same situation vaccination-wise come the fall with elections, how is that going to play out with a new council, and would that still be can you stipulate a vaccination mandate, or is it, how would that look?
Thank you very much. Through Chair Trombetta to Councillor Braddock, that's a great question. We think about it. We don't know the answer yet, but it is definitely on the list of things that we really have to give consideration to, and sort of hoping that we'd actually get some really great guidance from somebody else, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. So it is definitely not a worry, but an issue that does have to be addressed. And thank you for reminding us about the need to turn our attention to it.
Yes, I was curious if there could be a variant. Well, I guess that was a play on words and the whole variant. But if there could be a variable decision for council versus staff as general, so that perhaps that can be segregated. Obviously, I'll leave that to the EOC for further discussions, but would like to see, I would love to see the council as a whole back together, but in a safe capacity. So thank you very much for your hard work.
Councillor Ganan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to add a few things. I happened to listen today to the webinar that Dr. Hergy put on with the most up-to-date information. He was speaking to business people mostly because it was the Niagara Chamber of Business that was doing this. But he was talking about ways that we should all be helping to blunt the waves. And he talked about making sure that we were still enforcing masking, distancing, and screening might need to come back each time a wave peaks up, that we need to be prepared to perhaps put those things in place. He said very clearly he felt that they shouldn't be taken away but be able to be pulled back in whenever it was necessary. He talked about vaccination policies and suggested to some businesses that they might want to add having a third dose at the 4 to 7 month mark in order to keep that in place. So certainly he wasn't ready to say to businesses yet, if you have a policy in place, take it away. He talked about ventilation, making sure that businesses check their HVAC, make sure that windows are open when the weather allows, looking at the CO2 measurements as well because of the air and the ability to hold that. He talked about keeping masks in place while infections are in place. So if people have let go of masks, he was really asking the general public, if infections are going up, as they are reported to be right now, our hospitalizations in Niagara are at 105% of capacity, and they have been that way for a while now, and are increasing. So he did talk about, while those infections are up, to make sure that people are being asked to mask, not mandating masks, but asking people to be sensible about them. And then he talked about we need to enhance, as any business, the culture of staying home if you're sick. And he talked to businesses about self-screening, allowing for sick time, and he was particularly concerned about coming back after holiday seasons because, as the mayor alluded to, flu and COVID seasons kind of peak leading into the fall up to about the Christmas holiday time. People get together and then they all come back afterwards and the numbers are very high again. And so he talked about surge protocol protection and sort of looking at making sure that businesses have remote work options available to people, making sure that they still give sick time, and generally he was back to masking again. So I think it's pretty critical that we know that our medical officer of health is certainly still calling this a pandemic as of 1 o'clock today. And yes, it may become endemic at some point in time, but we're a long way from that at this point in time. So just an update. I listened on purpose in case there was further information tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Ganan. Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to back up a little bit because you had mentioned something to the mayor about, I guess, some communication you had with there, and I guess through you to the mayor. And I'm not so much even looking for a response as much as I just want to share an experience. Early into the pandemic, I guess myself and Councillor Trombetta were of like mind, and how we felt boxed out. And it was actually you, Mr. Mayor, that told us it was not our place, and that if we were to communicate through you because of the overload that the staff was carrying, and that you would vet which questions and comments were sent to them because they were burdened with all the extra work that had come with it in the early stages. And this went on for a few months. And I have to point out that I feel that your attitude towards everything shifted dramatically once you were removed from the EOC. And I think that's important to reflect yourself in your own time here, because I don't feel that your messaging has been consistent from the beginning here. And I just feel like even as we try to bring the community together and we want to bring council back together, I just feel like that in itself needs to be acknowledged, that it was you that was championing this. It was you that pulled the brake. It was you that told us it was not our place. And now you're on the other side, and it feels like you're saying the opposite. It feels like you're saying
it sounds like that, but I have an answer.
Okay, so I'll let you respond.
Yeah,
I have no problem with that.
So through, just before both of you get going, just through the chair, please, so we can have some sort of order.
Mr. Chair, the councillor is indeed correct, and you have to understand a couple of things. First of all, when the pandemic first started, there was a heightened sense of emergency, and so in the role playing that we had done through the emergency training, that was indeed, and I would stand by that today. That you know, the representative on the EOC, typically it's the mayor, is the spokesman to the council. Now, there were concerns about communications, and I should say that the criticism that was leveled against me then was there wasn't enough communications from the person on the EOC to the council. I'm just going to let that hang there. We do get the media releases from the EOC from time to time as they happen, I guess. But we'll let that. We did try. I tried to communicate better to the council. The second thing, as this has progressed, we see that the EOC is operating very differently than the actual state of emergency. That's also been raised. And finally, one thing that has changed, and I had no intention ever of developing policy inside the EOC for that wouldn't be properly brought. And I think you will both recall, both the chair and Councillor Riley, that I said that any decisions that needed to be made that were political would, of course, still take place. And I think that that's the part that and I think I've clearly stated that a policy was developed inside the EOC that was not properly presented to the council and vetted by them for input. And we are the people's representative. We are the ones who say who gets to work for the municipality through our CAO and the type of people and those kind of things. And that has been removed from us. And so your concerns that you expressed to me, which were concerns at the time, are actually realities that I see. And so I think that's how it looks like I'm wishy-washy, except that the reality is different today. And
Mr. Mayor, just to interrupt, because I know you don't want to come off this way, but you did just state that we have the jurisdiction of who to hire or how to hire. We do not. So just be careful what you said there.
Well,
because that's put.
Hold on, just wait.
Yeah, you just said.
Chair, I know. Let me clarify then. Let me clarify. We, in terms of the policy, a VAX policy or not a VAX policy, so in terms of general parameters, I think that properly resides with us, not the individual. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I just didn't want that message getting out there that we have authority on who's to hire in this municipality, because we do not, and I want to make that very clear.
No, not on an individual basis.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, for interrupting. I didn't want that message getting out there. Go ahead, Councillor Riley.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to our CAO. And I'm sorry to kind of throw this on you. My memories escape me here. I feel like might have been, well, obviously it was within the last 2 years, but at some point, this council as a whole, and I believe we had a recorded vote, and I believe it was supported unanimously, supported the actions and efforts and all the steps that the EOC and staff have taken. Do you by chance have that motion available, or if you could read or reflect ourselves, because I feel again like we're hearing conflicting opinions on matters, yet I feel like this council has been very supportive of everything the EOC has done. Even, despite our personal opinions, we understand that there's a professional element to it and that staff were following that and their responsibility. So I was just kind of curious if there was, if you had that before.
Madam CEO? I see you there, Councillor Yonker. Just Councillor Riley still has the floor there, and then I'll turn to you.
Thank you. If you could give me a minute, I'm just going through the whole stack of papers I have here, and I'll see if I can find that exact resolution. If council wants me to.
Not a problem. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Councillor Yonker.
Go ahead, Councillor Yonker. Councillor Riley will wait to come back to him.
Yeah, and I think I'm just trying to remember that vote too, and I think that vote was that we appreciate the work that they've done and the effort they put into this. Not been easy for anybody, and I think that was.
Councillor Yonker, you're going to have to talk close to the monitor because don't worry about your face getting real close. We just need to hear your words. So go ahead.
I do vote on that. Yeah. And it was more like, I understood that vote as we just to show support of the hard work that they put in and to show appreciation. I don't recall that we voted that. Hey, I agree with putting it in place because that's neither here nor there. But the question that I still have is, are we under a state of emergency? And I believe we are not. That has been lifted, and that's where I have concern with the policy. That was put in place under a state of emergency, and I understand what Chief Fisher said, that they're still got meetings to wrap stuff up and all that, but there's a time when that committee ends, and that's when does that actually take place, and how does that take place, or did it not already? That's my concern as well.
Okay, thank you. Madam CAO?
So through you, Chair Trombetta, to Councillor Riley, is that right?
Yeah.
Asked a question about, so on February 28th, there was a staff report that went to council directly, and it was with respect to the Township of West Lincoln COVID-19 emergency declaration and how we were going to manage the process to rescind it, which we did, and that was all good. But that report, it's a good report because it's a big history of everything that we have done here, and that included the September 27th council motion, and I'll read it just for the record again. So subsequently, on September 27th, 21, Council passed a resolution acknowledging the dedicated and collaborative efforts of the CAO and the Township EOC and supporting their diligent work to protect both the workers and the public from potential health hazards presented by the spread of COVID-19. And that was moved by Councillor Gannan and seconded by Councillor Riley. And the resolution read as this. Whereas the Township of West Lincoln's Emergency Operations Center Management Team, commonly referred to as the EOC, provides the overall management and coordination of local support activities and recovery by gathering together to collectively and collaboratively support the emergency response and manage the consequences of an emergency. And whereas the EOC has been consistently reviewing provincial regulations since March 2020 regarding the global COVID-19 pandemic, adjusting operations in accordance with provincial regulations, and communicating such changes with council staff and the community. And whereas the township has the obligation to protect the employees and the organization under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, that the Township of West Lincoln Council acknowledges the time, commitment, dedication, and collaborative efforts of the CAO and the Township Emergency Operations Center and supports diligent work to protect both the workers and the public from potential health hazards presented by the spread of COVID-19 and its variants, while following the statutory requirements of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, whereby the township is taking all reasonable steps to ensure a safe and healthy workplace environment for all workers. And that was a unanimous vote. And I'm just going to add one more point in terms of communication. Every time we communicate to staff, we CC council. Council gets every bit of information that staff get. And we try not to overwhelm it because it's a lot of information. And after 2 years, we've sent out a lot of information, but there is always consistency. You're always CC'd on the same information. And that has been
Thank you,
a
Madam
deliberate effort.
So
Thank you, Madam Senior. Go ahead,
I just
Councillor Riley.
want to finish up here. So I just, again, from at least my interpretation and understanding, and please, everybody, feel free to correct me if you interpret it differently, I guess, was that was council's endorsement and council showing their confidence in the actions taken by the EOC and staff members. So again, I come back to this moment now where I feel like we're, not so much we, as much as different members of council seem to be in opposition of that. And I think that's, important to highlight that, those members were, was it September of 2021 there, were of a different opinion there. And I get that we're probably beyond that pandemic exhaustion and we're all looking for the finish line. But, we're hearing from the staff who we've all shown our confidence and support behind saying we're not quite there, we're close, but we're not quite there. And I think, Mr. Mayor, as you told me once before, to have a little bit of faith, and I think that's the message we need to have right now as well, is, I feel like we're close and it's going to come, but I guess we're just not quite there just yet. And they're the professionals, as you've reminded me time and time again.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Mr. Mayor?
So thank you, Madam CEO, through the chair. Thank you, Madam CEO, for reading that. And again, I would still support that motion and still have the reservation that it does not include the vaccine policy that the township has adopted. So as I listened to it the second time, it was similar to what my memory of it was, and that is, to support the hard work that's been done and the communications that have been done, but nowhere does it say to endorse a policy. And so my reservation still stands. So I just wanted to get that, and so I would read that very differently than Councillor Riley. He says that it's kind of a tacit approval, and I would say no. There's support of the work that they're doing, but nowhere in there does it preclude that they can write policy. So I just want to, for the record, that's my understanding. And Mr. Chair, I've spoken a lot on this evening. I'm going to conclude with that comment, and then we'll see where this goes. Thank you.
Okay. I got to just real quickly, and then we can move on. I'm not seeing anything out of this, so I can move on. I'm going to echo what Councillor Rayner said and Councillor Broderick. By all means, if the EOC decides to change something after this meeting tonight or tomorrow next week, I'm all for it. What the CAO, how she hires her staff and who she hires and what is the requirements for a job, I have no jurisdiction, no influence, or any input on the matter at that. So I can say anything that's going in when it regards to staff, I have no authority, nor does this members of council, including the mayor, have any authority on how or what is in the policy, in their job description on how to hire somebody. That is up to the CAO, and that's what she was hired in this corporation to do. But as for myself, I don't have a problem if the two members that are not in this chamber or three members come back. I was just with you on Saturday, Mr. Mayor, at the market. So, I don't have a problem. It's the EOC's decision. Again, I don't have any jurisdiction over that. So I'm going to conclude it at that. I never did at the beginning, nor do I will moving forward, because I am not on that board at all. Seeing nothing else, I guess I'm going to. Oh, Councillor.
I do have that question.
Yep. Go ahead, Councillor Yonker. But Councillor Yonker, I need you.
Yeah. Okay. I did ask a question. When did the Emergency Act get lifted? The state of emergency.
It's very, Councillor Yonker. It's very, very hard to hear you. It's hard.
Wow. Okay. The Emergency Act, was the Emergency Act not lifted by the Premier Ford? And when was it lifted? And that's why I'm still don't understand why we are still under the emergency, running under the emergency committee or EOA. Wow.
I think
under that emergency. We're not under an emergency anymore. It's been lifted.
So Matt, I think the CAO answered that at the beginning, but we'll get it to answer one more time. Go ahead, Madam CAO.
So Councillor Yonker, through you, Chair Timbretta, you're asking when and
Correct.
Why?
I'm not asking why. It was lifted.
No, no. I think, okay, to be more clear, So, and I actually gonna have to ask the clerk maybe, or even the CMC for the actual date, because we followed suit with every other municipality in the region when the EOC, when the emergency order was lifted here in Niagara region. But if, and I don't know whether the clerk is able to give the date right now. Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
The emergency order was terminated on March 15th at 12:01 a.m.
Right. And Councillor Yunker, you don't have to have an emergency order in place to have an EOC running. It's they aren't cause effect sort of arrangements. And maybe to our CMC, can you clarify that a bit more further?
That's surprising to me, Mr. Chair.
So I think one of the things that members of council have to understand is the fact that the EOC does not have to have a emergency declaration to form. I had the Superior propane fire, didn't declare an emergency, but the EOC was activated. There's certain things and certain times where you can activate the EOC and not declare. You certainly don't need to declare a state of emergency to have your EOC up and running. It can be partially activated. It can be fully activated. You can put them on standby. There's lots of ways that you can deal with the EOC. So with the declaration being terminated, there's still a number of things that have to be done or continually do. One, we have had, like I said before, we've had a number of staff get infected with COVID. They're at home for 5 days, and staff and directors of each department have to manage and figure out how they're going to supply staff and maintain service levels. At this point in the game, getting vaccine and masking is the way we're going to get out of this. And if we don't continually do this, then we're going to continue to have the same problem. And so if you want to go down the road of, not having staff in the office because we have a number of staff 5 days in the park because they have isolation, that's going to happen. If you look at it now, as of today, we have 5 people off. We have 5 staff off with COVID that are 5 days in isolation right now. So, as I can appreciate what you're asking, there is a process that we have to follow under the Emergency Act to clean up all the loose ends and close. We got to take all our documentation. That's all got to be filed. We got to have our debriefing. Our regional EOC debriefing isn't until October of this year. So I understand where you're going and what you're asking, but it's not as simple as turning the light switch off.
Okay.
I'll shout any.
Thank you there, Chief. All right, seeing no other questions, I will move on to item A30-22. Members of committee, have any verbal updates of members of boards and committees? Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, I'll yield this. I actually thought we were on informative nature, so my apologies. I'll wait till the next round.
Okay, any members of committee and verbal updates? Not seeing anything. Let's move on to members of council and the other business of informative nature. Go ahead, Councillor Riley, then I got the mayor.
Thank you. And I'll try to be brief. I'm sure everybody might, or at least a few people might touch base on it. So I want to thank staff for the, for the Easter market there. I think that was really well received and really well put on, and certainly nice to have an opportunity again to, see the community come together. The other thing I wanted to mention is the success in, if you haven't seen my social media video already, the success of the turnout for the Easter egg hunt. I guess the day before, it was quite a turnout. I'm going to estimate, and I don't even know if it's fair to estimate because I don't even know looking back on it, but there had to be at least close to 500 people there, maybe a hair more. And so I thought that was really well received and really well put on. It was great to see some other, we had the fire trucks there and the petting zoo and face painting and the early on center. So it was great to, again, to have a little bit of that community involvement come back as we kind of stride back to normalcy. And I thought that was really well received. And just thank you to staff and everyone who was a part of that to make that a huge success, because the community really needed that, and I was happy to be a part of that and enjoy it myself with my family. So that's all I have to report.
Great, thanks, Councillor Riley. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Riley, for addressing those successful events. I wanted to let council know just briefly that this afternoon the CAO and myself had a brief meeting with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Niagara North and West. I don't know exactly, I think it's North and West, so it includes everything from Niagara to Lake St. Catharines all the way to Grimsby, and then and then us, West Lincoln. They've merged. It's one of the other organizations, one of the many charitable organizations that took a hit during COVID, but they are trying to regroup and to make adjustments during these times as well. And so we had a very profitable discussion. I think there's some. It was good for us, for Madam CEO and myself, to meet with their directors, and hopefully we see some positive events emerge from our initial discussion. So stay tuned, I think is the best way to say that. And that's all, Mr. Chair.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor Ganane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, wearing my Kiwanis hat, I just want to say how important it was that the not-for-profit aspect was included in the the spring market. I was going to call it Easter market, and it seemed like winter with the snow that we just had. But in any case, I think it's important for people to know that when those groups are there, like community care, how valuable that support is, and how good it is to be able to talk to people about getting volunteers to help with things like West Lincoln Community Care. From the Kiwanis perspective, it allows us, for the first time in a long time, to raise some funds so that we can donate to Forge and to 4-H and groups like that also are part of our community. The important thing about Kiwanis, of course, is that any money that's raised in West Lincoln stays in West Lincoln, and we feel that that's very important. And just a quick nod to the Chamber of Commerce for their Business After 5 last week at Domaine Quai-Luce. About 30 people were able to come out on a day that actually was a lovely spring day, and you could be inside or outside and enjoy the hospitality of that winery, the only winery in West Lincoln. So we'll give them a little plug as well. It's a lovely place to go out and spend some time and have a meal and a glass of wine. Thank you.
Excellent. Great, Councillor. Okay, back to you. I just have something to finish. Go ahead real quick, yeah.
So I just wanted to mention as well, I believe Councillor Ganane and possibly her husband are volunteering at this, but this Friday, the blood clinic is in town there at Sir John Calvin, and so anybody who's watching, they certainly are in need of blood. So I know myself, I have a 6:10 appointment booked that I'll be donating for the first time. Told Councillor Ganane I was a little nervous about it, but not a big fan of needles. But anyways, anybody else out there, highly recommended. They certainly are in need of blood. So if you can, just pull up your sleeve and donate, they certainly would appreciate that.
It's good. It's good to donate there, Councillor Riley, but you did clarify your lack of, I guess, wanting needles, but it's good that you're doing that. That's a good thing that's coming to town. I just wanted to just echo the councillors about the market. The market was, I saw Councillor Ganane there, the CAO, I saw Councillor Riley, and I saw the mayor. I was there not all day, so I didn't know if all members made it, but it was a good success. 9 to 1 o'clock, a lot of the vendors were sold out actually by closing time, and I see the turnout there. That's at that market. It's always a great turnout, and I was talking to Michelle, the coordinator of the market. It looks like the outdoor market is looking very favorable. She did hear some of the council's concerns on getting some food vendors for Friday night. Where you can actually get something to eat, pick up some fresh vegetables or a pie, and then make your way home. So that's good to hear that some new vendors are coming and it looks like it's going to be a hit once again this year, starting when the weather breaks and we can get outside. But hopefully, luckily, it's not today's weather because it's been pretty bad. But anyways, other than that, that's all I really had. So seeing anything else, new business, I don't have any items of new business. There's no confidential matters, so I will adjourn the first portion of tonight's meeting at 8:43. And I'll just give it some seconds for everybody to kind of just use the 2 minutes, and then we'll head over to give the chair over to Councillor Yonker for Public Works.
Good evening. Welcome to Public Works Committee meeting number 3. I am your
It's happening again, Councillor. Unless I don't know what you guys want to do here. If I want you to run the meeting, Councillor, but it's tough for us, all of us. See, the mayor shaking his head a bit that he's not hearing you too there. So I don't know if
So Councillor Jonker, when you turn your head, that's when it disappears again. When you're looking straight on, it's nice and clear.
Yeah.
And when you turn your head, it disappears.
Okay, so what?
Yeah, because I
don't know what the suggestion.
I got to look at my other screen.
Can you hold the microphone in your hand?
Is this? No, I don't have that. I just got a new laptop. And that, so it's not good, because I'm looking at my screen over here to read the.
Counselor.
Okay, can we, hold on one second. Can we stream hold off 1 second, please? We are live.
Good evening. I am your chair, Councillor Jonker. We are at our Public Works Record Meeting number 3. Due to the efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect all individuals, the council chamber will not be open to the public to attend standing meetings until further notice. The public may submit comments for matters that are on the agenda to at westlincoln.ca before 4:30 on the day of the meeting. Comments submitted will be considered as public information and read into public record. This has been live streamed as well as recorded and will be on the township. We'll move to the land acknowledgement statement. In Niagara region situated. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Adirondack, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara region today. The township of West Lincoln, as part of the regional municipality of Niagara, stands with all the Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship lands on which we live. Are there any changes in order of items on the agenda? Seeing none. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and or conflict of interest? Seeing or hearing none. We have no appointments for this meeting. Items and requests to address items on the agenda. Is there anybody that has made such requests? Seeing none, then I don't think we need to read the whole thing, the procedures. We'll move on to 7 consent agenda items. 2 of them moved that the Public Works Recreation Arena Committee hereby approves the following consent agenda items. Item 1B, and is hereby received for information. And item 2B, received. This is not reading right, is it? So the first item is information report PW08-22-2021 MECP annual water report, inspection report, For some reason, my laptop, yeah, okay. And the second one is recommendation report REC-04-2022 regarding the 2022 Garden of the Year. Do I have a mover for that? With exceptions of any items being pulled, I see Mayor Dave and Councillor Gadan, sorry. And we can vote on that. Any objections or in favor? All in favor? It's hard to see the chamber, but it looks like everybody voted in favor. Communications, we have one. This is a item, Anne Maria Noura, Niagara Regional Clerk, report PW 15-2022, moving transit forward, initial transit activities and next steps. One, that the township not opening up. That the Township of West Lincoln recommends Niagara Regional Council to appoint somebody as a representative on the Transportational Niagara Transit Commission Board based on the criteria outlined in Niagara Regional Report PW-15-2022 and it's in brackets, moving transport forward, initial transit activities and next steps, and that the regional council be notified of the appointment recommendation by no later than April 29, 2022. And do I have a mover for that, or do we have to appoint somebody? Do we not?
No, we need a mover and seconder first, yeah.
Yeah, we need a mover and a seconder. So, mover, Councillor Ganan, seconder. Guys in the chamber, if you want to do, you have to hold your hand up really high. Thank you, Councillor Gambetta as a seconder. All those in favor?
Oh no, we need to appoint somebody first.
Okay, yes.
So Councillor Ganan has her hand up.
Councillor Ganan, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to supply a name for that empty spot, please. I'm suggesting perhaps Councillor Riley might like to do that job since he is in town and represents the ward that has a great number of people and certainly are the people that are currently at least using Niagara Regional Transit. So, so I would like to suggest that we put Bill Riley's name in there.
I'll accept.
Councillor William Riley, do you accept that?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I appreciate that. Any objections then to that, or anybody else that we have? Seeing none, we can move forward on the vote as being Councillor Riley being the representative on that committee. Is that all those in favor?
Support.
Okay, thank you. I see everybody in the chamber, yes, and the councillor, mayor as well, so that passed. Good. Then we move on to staff reports. This is not working as it did earlier. So staff report number item 9.1, item PW 1120. And this is from Manager of Parks and Recreation Facilities, Bob Dennison, and Director of Public Works and Recreation, Mike DiPaolo. Recommendation report REC-03-2022, Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act 2002 and Ontario Regulations 30/11. And the recommendation, the first is that recommendation report recommendation report REC-030-2022 Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act 2022 and Ontario Regulations 30/11 dated April 19th, 2022 be received for information, and second, that the Council of the Township of West Lincoln hereby supports Prince Edward County's call for government action concerning the current legislation and regulations surrounding municipal requirements to take over and maintain abandoned operating cemeteries, and three, that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Minister of Government and Consumer Services, ROMA, and all Ontario municipalities. Can I have a mover for that?
I'll move that, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mayor, and seconded by Councillor Riley.
And Mr. Chair, I have a comment here.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Riley, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
No worries. So I'm going to go through you, Mr. Chair, to our Director of Public Works, although I think he's going to go possibly to the individual who put it on the agenda here. But if we could just have a little bit of explanation for the public, can get an understanding what's being asked here and why this is important to our community, I think that would be really wise to have that publicly shared.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Director.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Riley. As outlined in the report, the Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act basically is a legislation that whenever there's a private cemetery that is non-operational, the act basically passes the ownership of these defunct cemeteries to the municipality, and local municipality has to take on the ownership of the cemeteries and administer the daily operation and maintenance of such. So it's quite a burden for our municipality. As stipulated in the report, we had 3 recent downloads. In 2016, the township assumed Caister Baptist Church Cemetery. And in 2017, the township assumed Bismarck Cemetery, as well as Bethel Cemetery. So anyways, taking ownership of acquiring ownership of these lands, it requires quite a financial burden to a municipality. First off, there's a lot of legal and land transfer fees that we have to take, implement before we take the cemeteries over. And typically, whenever we do take a cemetery, there's very, very little or no trust fund for us to really take over the cemetery. As well, cemeteries are sometimes they're full or they're closed, so there's really no opportunity to make revenue on these cemeteries, and we just got to maintain them forever. So the cost could be pretty substantial. The report also stipulates that there's about 7 private cemeteries in the township of West Lincoln, and we've had one recent private cemetery reach out to us to assume ownership of it, and just assuming that cemetery could easily double our existing operation budget that we have for our cemeteries. So staff is recommending that the township support Prince Edward County's call for government action, and in which that county is asking for the government to consider developing a program that would either provide seed money to properly fund the initial costs for taking over cemeteries, and that would obviously help us, or perhaps even change the legislation to provide some kind of relief for small rural municipalities like ourselves. So that's basically the gist of this report. Perhaps Bob could, perhaps our manager of Parks and Rec could add to the general overview that I provided.
Good evening, councilors.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so it's not only financial, but there's a lot of staff time and effort, contacting previous trustees of the churches, etc., and then our lawyers to handle land transfer. Sometimes the documentation is not even there for property ownership, insurance, etc. So this has been a little bit of a burden for the Township of West Lincoln, and I can foresee it becoming more of a burden. I've called on the bereavement authority of Ontario, who the departments deal with, to even provide assistance, in having somebody to guide you through the process, and that it's a very difficult process for many municipalities.
Excellent, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, to our CAO, I believe this coming August, I know Councillor Ganan and myself, I think maybe the mayor and yourself we're attending AMO. I'm wondering if this could possibly be one of the items if we can try to compete with some of the other municipalities to getting a delegation with. So I guess I'm not so much asking as much as kind of putting the idea out there, because I think this is important to address. As you know, we've heard from staff here, it's an extra burden, and they need to be respectfully taken care of. And so it'd be great to get some support from the provincial governments and to help us manage that. So if I can just put that out there, if you want to make a comment, feel free. I just more or less am making an informal request.
Okay, just quickly through you, Chair Junker, to Councillor Riley. I think it's a great idea, a new topic, and I know, having read the report, that I was actually quite delighted to see that this is starting to be raised, because our staff talk about this all the time, and I think this is a new and emerging issue that it's not just a West Lincoln thing for sure, but the more people talk about it, the more the government will understand.
Go ahead, Councillor Rayner. See you had your hand up.
Thank you. Well, I sat on the cemetery board when we used to have it years ago before they dissolved it, for still a reason I don't understand, because it's more important, as it's brought out right now by Mike and Bob. It's even more important now, but for some reason that committee was dissolved. But anyways, I understand the importance of what they're up against, because it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. And more are going to be downloaded as more and more churches dissolve. And the old tradition of the beautiful old churches was you always had the cemetery behind the church, that your loved ones were not far from where you practiced your religion. So there's a lot of them out there that have cemeteries around the churches. And every time that church dissolves, we end up getting them. I've never known AMO to be very successful. It's a sounding board. It makes you mentally feel relief, but do you get results? In the 15 years I've been a counselor, I can't even tell you one AMO that's come across us, and we supported many that really resulted in anything. It's a sounding board. It makes you feel good, but I've never seen really any positive results for it. If you've got another way, if you're going to meet in the room or whatever and have a discussion with the minister, that to me would be much more positive, because that avenue is just a sounding board to relieve a lot of mental anxiety, but I haven't really seen too much positive come out of it. But anyways, I understand there's a problem. I would agree that we definitely need government assistance, because this is going to chew more and more of our budget down the road, and it's going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. It cannot possibly get better. So I'm glad to see we're trying to do something about it. But I just, again, going back to that cemetery committee that we had, that board, had we had that board, this item might have been brought up 10 years ago, because that problem initiated a long time ago. It hasn't gone away. It's only getting worse now. And now it's to the point of panicking almost, because we've been downloaded with Bismarck. We've been downloaded with Concession 5 and Edmonton's, and another one. So it's just going to get worse. It's just a shame that it's got to this point before we're reacting. But I don't know if we could ever bring that committee back, or bring that board back, but it's certainly, I thought it was very useful. It did a lot of positive things. We fixed a lot of headstones that were broken or displaced, or ground that needed leveling or anything. We did a lot of very good project work on certain particular cemeteries that had lack of attention and maintenance over the years, and we brought them back to something where people go there they can be proud of. It's a shame we discontinued that. It'd be nice if we brought it back. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam CEO, I see you had your hand up, or sorry. No,
I was clarifying, the counselor had been talking about Roma. I think that was just when Prince Edward County put it forward, they wanted it circulated to Roma, so we were following suit. But the delegation and AMO is a good idea.
Okay, good. So I call the question. All those in favor? Or any more questions? Or yeah, all those in favor, that passes. Good, we'll move on to staff report 9.2, item PW 12-22 from Manager of Operations Steve McGeen and Director of Public Works and Recreation Mike DiPaolo. Amendment to budget regarding a 2022 motor grader purchase authorization. And for some reason, this thing is not listening to my fingers to open it up. There we go. Sorry. One, that recommendation report PW-07-2022 amendment regarding the 2022 motor grader purchase authorization dated April 19th, 2022 be received, and two, that council accept the RFP submission by Tormont Cat for the supply and delivery of the 2022 motor grader in the amount of $596,500 plus HST, and three, that council approve a budget amendment BA 2022-02 in the amount of $63,000 from the equipment reserve, and four, that a bylaw be placed the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with Tormont Cat. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seconded by Councilor Ganan. Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councilor Rayner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Steve, can you give an update for the people who are listening with regards to this grader, please?
Hi, through you, Chair. Councilor Rayner, can you be more specific, please, to your request?
Well, the information is the purchase was part of the budget process, but you've got a submission here of the amount, and then there's an increase of 63,000. Can you go through the scenario that resulted in this recommendation request?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Through you, Chair, to Mr. Councilor Rayner. The problem was when we purchased a similar grader in 2017, the cost of that grader was $350,000. Approximately a year and a half ago, when I priced out the grader for this year's budget, that price was around, it should have cost around $600,000, but with the obvious COVID results of short supply and demand for pretty much everything, the prices have dramatically increased in the last 2 years, resulting in that shortfall from what we had budgeted for about a year and a half ago.
Thank you, sir.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. McGeen. So we did not fix a price with them at that time or come to some kind of agreement, or we just kind of used the number that they had available a year ago and submitted that in the budget. There was no, I believe we did that with the trucks. Aren't we ordering trucks like 3 or 4 years ahead and at a fixed price? Is that not correct?
Through you, Chair, to Councilor Rayner. Yes, you're correct. We did do that with trucks because we foresaw that there was going to be trucking issues. The problem there, the reason why we did that, because the trucks were taking approximately 2 years to get from date of order to date of delivery. So that wasn't so much a financial reasoning. That was just so that we could get the trucks when we actually needed them. So if we ordered them 2 years in advance, we would get them in that second year and we wouldn't have to pay for them for that second year. So it wouldn't negatively affect the budget, or we wouldn't have to go deep into the reserves. For the grader, it's just a one grader, and they don't have the delay times that the trucks did. So, and nobody could have really saw the massive increase in prices for these graders that has came about. hopefully that helps.
Let me guess. The other thing is they don't have the computer chip available now, so you got to wait another year anyways. Or is that just cars? Sorry.
Yeah, fortunately, that's just trucks.
Oh, there you go. All right. Thank you.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, sorry, I did not hear
Yes,
who
sorry.
seconded the resolution.
Oh,
I think it was Councillor Ganan.
Thank you.
yes. Was it not? Good.
Oh, may I have one more question?
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. Back to Steve. Keeping this in mind and the financial environment that we live in right now, where everything is skyrocketing for basically no rhyme or reason, other than the excuse of something called COVID, is there anything coming up that we need down the road, like those trucks, that we should be locking in a price now? For example, if you're going to submit a budget next year for something very expensive and you know that we're going to have it, rather than submit it next year and have another $63,000 increase from this year, that you should be bringing something forward to council, to committee, to say, look, there's a couple items I need next year. I think it would be in our best financial interest if we kind of lock this in now, keep it in our back pocket, and make sure we include it in the budget, but at least we're not going to get stung with this afterwards. Is there any situations like that? You mentioned the truck was because of delivery. Now we've got the grader because of whatever ridiculous asinine reason they have in this world for increasing everything crazy right now. But that's probably not going to go away. So is there anything else that we've got coming up that you can get a heads up and prevent this from happening again?
I can maybe answer that. I'm going to guess no, because I know for trucks as well, they're saying, yeah, we're not going to lock in certain prices. So it's going to be the same with equipment. That's going to be my guess. Am I wrong, Steve or Mike DiPaolo? You want to answer that? Go ahead.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Rayner, a lot of opportunities, procurement opportunities that where you could lock in prices for multiple years, that's literally stopped in a lot of situations because the market's so volatile that everyone's afraid to lock in any prices and then end up losing money down the road. So we are involved in a lot of procurements that with other regions and other provinces throughout Canada. So that's our best bet. And that's kind of the way we've been going forward so that we can leverage purchasing throughout all of Canada, not just in our local area. And that so far to date has been the best way of combating the price increases.
But there was nothing we could do with regard to this grader, or we got a better deal than we would have got?
Through Chair to Councillor Rayner, yes, we went through the provincial purchasing group buying to get the grader at the price that we did. Had we not and just put out our own tender, we would have paid a substantially more amount of money. So we're doing our best in the procurement realm to minimize costs to the taxpayers. But like you said, for whatever reason, unfortunately, the prices of everything have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director. I see your hand up as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Rayner, in addition to what Mr. McGean said, like, we procured through a larger group to try to get some really good prices, which we did, and unfortunately, it's still higher than what we budgeted for. But I think we will review what our equipment needs are over the next few years, as you have suggested, and if there is an opportunity to maybe, have a few more. Move up a few more pieces of equipment in the forecast and see if there's any benefit to that. That's something we will review as part of our annual budget preparation. So that's a good suggestion. We'll look into stuff like that as well, in addition to what we've done for this purchase by using a provincial Canada-wide procurement process.
Yeah, thank you. Just keeping the volatility in mind is a good reason to try to get something now, because we can't predict the future. And we know right now it's extremely unstable. Thanks.
Could crash too. Yes, Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. So I'm glad that you brought up the purchase of the last one. If I do remember at the time, the director then said that we did get a really good deal on that other grader, and that was for even for different reasons. So I I remember then we budgeted about $500,000 and we got it for 350, and I thought that was super. I think on that one file we saved copious amounts of money, 150,000 for that one. So my question now has to do with, so we maintain a fleet of 2 graders. Is that true? Two graders?
Through chair to the mayor, that's correct. We have 2 graders.
So if we purchased the one in 2017, and I remember getting the report about how rickety the one that it replaced was. I think not too long ago, or maybe earlier this spring or late in the fall, I did see the newer grader out there. It still looks really good shape. Are we set now actually for a good long time with these 2 graders that are relatively new? One's 5 years old, and then this one will be new. And then, does that give us some distance in terms of graders? Probably being one of the more expensive rolling stock that we own.
Through chair to the mayor, that's correct. That is definitely our most expensive piece of equipment that we have. The last one being purchased in 2017. The graders aren't like trucks. They last a lot longer. They have a service expected life of 20 years. So, technically, if things all go well and the last grader that we purchased, we should be good for 20 years after 2017, give or take.
Yeah, okay. And it's really unfortunate that we didn't do paving, because I really had hoped we would not have to buy a second one, and by the time we got to 20 years from now, we could maintain the rest of our roads with just one grader. But okay, we'll see where we are in 20 years on that file. I know that it's kind of been a double hit. I know that we have capacity now. We should have capacity now for 15 years. And of course, we do get a little return for I'm assuming we're going to divest the used grader that we have.
Through chair to the mayor, that's correct. We sell everything on a public auction. So that grader will go to auction, and then the sale from that grader will go back into the reserves.
Okay. If I could just request just out of curiosity, at some point in the future when that does go to auction, I'd be curious to know what a used grader goes for these days. So that's just a curiosity.
You can watch it on Ritchie Brothers. You want to come down and watch it at Ritchie Brothers anytime?
No, it's okay.
There's one on.
Yes. Okay, that's all, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Councilor Rayner again.
Yes, through to Steve. Where are these going for auction? You taking them out to Push Lynch to Bryant's, or you got somewhere else?
Through you, chair to Councilor Rayner, we put everything on govdeals.com.
Oh, all right. So you don't ship them out anymore. You just sell them from here, and then once they're sold, they ship out. Is that how it works?
That's correct.
Well, how long ago have you been doing that?
As long as I've been with the township, we've been doing that.
Because I know Push Lynch puts one heck of a lot of used stuff through, and I thought a lot of it did come from municipalities throughout Ontario. I know the rest of it's all farm equipment, but yeah.
There's many options.
That's standpoint. Yeah.
Well, they have fire trucks there. They have everything. But
so does Ritchie's. But yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So any other questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Moving on to 9.3. Item PW-13-22. That recommendation report PW-06-2022 regarding 2022 road rehabilitation project tender award at PW 2022-01 budget amendment, and that being B 2022-3 dated April 19th, 2022 be received, and 2, that council awards a tender submission to Walker Construction Limited for the road rehabilitation work in the amount of $876,971 excluding HST, and 3, that a project contingency amounts allowance in the amount of $87,594.31 be provided for this project, and that budget amendment BA 2022-03 be reallotted the financing for the 4 road projects included within this tender as outlined in Appendix C be approved, and 5, that a bylaw be passed to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with Walker Construction Limited. Can I get a mover for that? Councillor Riley, seconded by Mr. Okay, Councillor Rayner. Any questions or comments? Councillor Rayner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Mr. DePaula. I'm familiar with contingencies, but contingencies in all the years that I've managed plants have always been based on percentages, 10%, 20%, whatever the contingency. How did they get 87,594? Like if you took 10% of 876,971, you'd have 87,690. You'd have 87,697. Yet it got 87,594, which is like 9.9%. How did you get that number?
Through the chair to Councillor Rayner, if you look at page 2 of your report, what we did was just kind of round, we're trying to project the total estimated cost to be a round figure of 980,000. So the tender cost was 876,971. The non-recoverable HST is just over 15,000. So the project contingency of that odd number that you read out was approximately 10%, just to make it around $980,000. So it's approximately 10%. It's not 10% exactly.
Oh, so it wasn't accurate. It was just a rough ball.
Exactly.
Yeah. No. It's just that when you got it to the penny, that tells me that it wasn't a rough ball, that there was a statistical calculation done in order to get that. Otherwise, the last 3 or 4 digits would have been zeros. Right. But since we went down to the penny, somebody must have had a calculation, and I just didn't understand how they got it, because obviously it was some formula that I'm not aware of. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, it was just to round up the total project cost to 980,000.
All right. Good. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that passes. Moving to 9.4. You gotta love technology. It just doesn't listen sometimes. There we go.
That's why I have
that.
Oh,
yeah, I know. I should have printed one off. That
recommendation.
What I do. For 22 regarding 2022 Wellandport grass cutting contract request for quotation. RFQ authorization 3-year term dated April 19th, 2022 to be received, and 2, that council landscaping for a 3-year contract in the total amount of $27,100 plus HST, and that a bylaw be passed to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with North Lane Landscape. And I get a mover for that. Councillor Bradley. Thank you. Any comments or questions?
Sorry,
Seeing
Mr.
none,
Chair.
all those.
No, sorry, Mr. Chair, I could not hear the
Pardon
second.
me?
I did not hear the seconder. Sorry, it's Joanne. I did not hear the seconder.
Yep.
Cheryl.
The seconder was Ganan.
Thank you.
Sorry, I must have looked away, eh? Okay, any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that passes. I don't think there's any other business or other items of an informative nature, because we took care of that in the last committee, or is there? Seeing none, no new business. Seeing none, no confidential matters, I adjourn this meeting at 9:28. Good night, everyone.